Before Uganda existed, one kingdom rose from myth and legend. But was Buganda founded by man or by the gods? Picture this, a thick fog curling across the hills at dawn, the sound of drums echoing faintly through the mist. In the distance, a throne glows with a golden aura, empty but waiting. And if you listen closely, it's as though voices of the ancestors whisper in the wind, calling out names that still shape history today. This isn't just a folktale parents told their children around the fire. It's a story that carried power, a story so compelling that it shaped how an entire kingdom understood itself. It begins not with armies or warriors, but with a man and a woman whose love would forever alter the destiny of their people. Yet, like every great origin story, it hides a dangerous question at its heart. Because Buganda's beginning is more than romance and tradition. It's about how myth can build nations, how legends can give rulers their authority, and how belief can unify people around something greater than themselves. Every throne, every crown, every kingdom needs a story that explains why it deserves to exist. For Buganda, that story was the legend of Kintu and Nambi. But here's the twist. What if this tale we've heard for centuries is not the whole truth? What if the story that built Buganda is far more complicated, filled with secrets, betrayals, and hidden meanings we were never told? So before we dive into the rise of kings and the politics of clans, let's go back to where it all began. A love story between earth and sky, a forbidden choice, and a decision that opened the door to both life and death. But what if everything you thought you knew about Buganda's beginning was only half the story?
Today, we dive into episode 1 of this journey, the birth of Buganda. We're going to peel back the layers of history and legend to uncover how Buganda, one of the greatest kingdoms in Africa, first began. And trust me, it's not the dry history lesson you may have expected. This story has everything: love, rebellion, betrayal, and power. We'll start with the love story of Kintu and Nambi, a tale that seems simple at first glance, but carries with it the seeds of destiny and tragedy. Kintu, the man of the earth with nothing but a cow, and Nambi, the daughter of Gulu, the god of the sky. Their union wasn't just a romance, it was the bridge between heaven and earth, between man and the divine. But love stories rarely come without conflict, and in this one, a single forbidden choice set in motion consequences that would shape all of humanity. Then we'll move from myth into power. Because Buganda's story doesn't stop with romance, it flows into the rise of the very first Kabaka, Kato Kintu. He was not simply a ruler who appeared out of nowhere. His authority was rooted in this ancient tale, giving him a divine legitimacy that no warrior sword or army could provide. Through him, myth became monarchy. And finally, we'll uncover how these myths gave Buganda its unshakable legitimacy. Every nation needs a story, but Buganda's was more than a story. It was a claim to divine destiny. It explained why its rulers mattered, why its people were united, and why its throne was unshakable for centuries. By the end of this episode, you'll see how a single legend turned into the foundation of one of Africa's greatest kingdoms. And you'll discover that behind the myths we often dismiss as just stories lies real power. Power that continues to echo across history, even into our lives today. So, let's begin. Kintu was not a king. He was not a warrior. He wasn't even a man of great wealth. He was just one man and a cow. That was his entire world. He lived humbly, wandering the fertile lands, surviving on what the earth gave him. And yet, out of this simplicity came a story so powerful it would shape the destiny of a kingdom. Far above, in the realm of the gods, lived Gulu, the ruler of the skies. His home was filled with light and music, with children who danced among the clouds. Among them was his daughter, Nambi. Curious, radiant, and unlike her siblings, she longed for more than the safety of the heavens. Her eyes often drifted toward the earth below, where mortals struggled, loved, and lived. One day, Nambi descended to the earth with her brothers, and there she saw Kintu, a solitary man tending to his cow. He was different, strong in silence, humble in spirit. Where others might have seen poverty, Nambi saw purity. In his simple life, she found something her heavenly home lacked: authenticity. And in that moment, she fell in love. But love between the divine and the mortal was forbidden. Her father, Gulu, would never approve. The gods had rules that kept heaven and earth apart. Yet Nambi's heart was unshaken. She chose Kintu. When she confessed her desire to marry him, Gulu was furious. How could his daughter leave the splendor of the sky for a man who owned nothing but a cow? To prove Kintu's worth, Gulu set impossible tasks, tests meant to break him. He ordered Kintu to fetch water in a basket full of holes, to cut grass with a blunt knife, to eat enormous amounts of food prepared by the gods themselves. Each trial seemed unfair, humiliating even. And yet, with wit, courage, and a quiet determination, Kintu passed them all. Piece by piece, he proved that his love for Nambi and his right to stand beside her was unbreakable. Finally, worn down by Kintu's resolve, Gulu allowed the marriage. But his blessing came with a warning. "You may leave with Nambi, but do not return here once you set foot on earth. If you forget something, if you turn back, you will invite disaster." And so, Nambi and Kintu prepared to leave heaven. They gathered seeds to plant, animals to raise, and blessings to carry into their new life. With joy in her heart, Nambi followed Kintu toward their destiny. But just as they descended, she remembered something. She had forgotten food for her beloved hen. Against Gulu's warning, she turned back. And that's when everything changed.
For waiting in the skies was her brother, Walumbe. Walumbe was not like Nambi. He was jealous, restless, and filled with bitterness. When he saw Nambi and Kintu preparing for a life together, he demanded to go with them. Despite Kintu's hesitation, Nambi could not refuse her brother, and so Walumbe descended with them to the earth. At first, things seemed peaceful. Kintu and Nambi planted the seeds, raised the animals, and built a new life together. But Walumbe's true nature soon revealed itself. He grew resentful of Kintu's happiness, envious of the harmony between the couple. And then he made a chilling demand: "Give me one of your children to serve me." Kintu refused. These were his children, his blood, his future. To hand one over would be unthinkable. Walumbe, enraged, declared a curse: "If you will not give me one child, then I will take them all. And not just yours, I will take the children of men forever." And so it began. Death entered the world. From that moment, every family, every clan, every generation would feel the sting of Walumbe's wrath. No one could escape it. But here's the haunting part. Remember Gulu's warning? One rule, one command: do not turn back. Had Nambi obeyed, Walumbe would never have followed. The destiny of Buganda, perhaps even of humanity, would have been different. So, was this just a love story gone wrong? Or was it a coded truth, a way for the Buganda to explain the mystery of life and death? Because in this legend, love created life, but one act of disobedience invited death. And yet the story doesn't end there. Because while death had entered the world, Life in Buganda was only just beginning. The seeds that Kintu and Nambi planted would grow into clans. Their children would become the ancestors of a nation. And out of this union, mortal and divine, came the legitimacy of kings. But how did one man, descended from this legend, step out of myth and onto the throne as the first Kabaka? And why did his rule matter so much that it cemented Buganda as a kingdom destined to endure? That's where the story takes a turn, from myth to monarchy.
Now here's where myth meets history. For generations, the story of Kintu and Nambi carried more than entertainment. It was a foundation, a sacred origin. But legends, no matter how powerful, eventually collide with the realities of politics, leadership, and power struggles. And in Buganda, that collision came with the rise of the very first Kabaka, Kato Kintu. Kato Kintu's story is fascinating because he doesn't derive in the chronicles like a character out of thin air. Instead, he enters a world already caught in conflict. Before him, Buganda was not the powerful, organized kingdom we imagine today. The land was fragmented, with clans holding their own authority, and at the top sat a ruler named Bemba, a leader described as harsh, unpredictable, and unpopular with many of the clans. It was in this climate that Kato Kintu emerged. His rise wasn't just about strength, it was about strategy. He forged alliances with clans who were weary of Bemba's rule. He presented himself not merely as another contender for power, but as someone whose legitimacy reached beyond politics, someone tied to the sacred origin of the people themselves. Remember, Kintu was not just a name anymore. It was the name of the first man, the husband of Nambi, the one who bridged earth and sky. By claiming that mantle, Kato Kintu carried divine credibility into his bid for the throne. And this wasn't unique to Buganda. Just like Rome claimed descent from Romulus and Remus, two brothers suckled by a she-wolf and chosen by the gods, Buganda claimed descent from Kintu and Nambi. Rome used myth to justify empire. Buganda used myth to justify kingship. In both cases, stories weren't decoration. They were weapons of legitimacy. So how did Kato Kintu actually seize power? The chronicles describe it like this. With the backing of powerful clans, he challenged Bemba's rule. Tension grew until finally it erupted into open conflict. In the decisive struggle, Kintu's side prevailed. Bemba was overthrown, and Kato Kintu was enthroned as the first Kabaka of Buganda. But here's the genius. His reign wasn't built only on victory. It was built on structure. Kato Kintu understood that military triumph alone could not hold a kingdom together. He needed to weave the clans into a single fabric. And so he established a system that gave each clan its place, its responsibilities, and its honor within the new kingdom. Every clan was tied into the larger whole, but the throne, the Kabaka, became the unifying center. He also instituted rituals that bound the monarchy to the myth. The Kabaka was not just a political leader, he was a sacred figure. His authority came from the gods through the story of Kintu. When he sat on the throne, it wasn't simply a man ruling. It was the embodiment of Buganda's destiny, legitimized by divine origin. Think about that for a moment. Power rooted only in force crumbles when a stronger rival appears. But power rooted in belief, that endures. Kato Kintu didn't just conquer a throne. He created a system where every successor could claim, "I stand in the line of Kintu, the one chosen by heaven." And that was a claim no rival could easily dispute. This is how myth becomes monarchy. This is how story transforms into state. By fusing the legend of Kintu with the political reality of his own reign, Kato Kintu created more than a kingdom. He created a dynasty, a structure that outlived him, carried forward through centuries, shaping Buganda into one of the most enduring kingdoms in Africa. But here's the question we need to ask. Was this simply clever politics, or did the people truly believe that their ruler carried divine legitimacy? And if they did believe, how far were they willing to go to defend a throne that they thought was chosen by the gods themselves? Because the story doesn't stop with Kato Kintu's victory. It goes deeper into how myth became the glue holding society together, how fear of Walumbe's curse of death kept obedience in check, and how every clan found its identity in the story of a man, a woman, and the gods. And that takes us into the heart of the matter, the role of myth in political legitimacy.
Every great nation has a story. America looks back to its founding fathers and the Declaration of Independence. Rome told the tale of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf, chosen by fate to build an empire. Japan speaks of emperors descending from the sun goddess Amaterasu. These stories are more than bedtime tales. They're anchors, reminders of who a people are, where they come from, and why their leaders deserve to rule. Buganda was no different. Its foundation rested on the legend of Kintu and Nambi. That story mattered because it did something no sword, no army, no single king could do. It united the clans. In a land where dozens of clans each held their own histories and heroes, the legend gave them a shared beginning. Instead of competing origin stories, they could all point back to Kintu, the first man who loved a daughter of the gods and whose children became the ancestors of all. That meant no clan was outside the story. Every clan belonged, and belonging is powerful. But it wasn't just about unity. The story also gave rulers divine right. Kato Kintu wasn't merely a man who defeated Bemba. He was a Kabaka whose authority stretched back to the heavens. By tying his name to Kintu of legend, he claimed more than political victory. He claimed destiny. When he ruled, he wasn't just a chief among chiefs. He was the living symbol of Buganda's connection to the gods. That made challenging him more than rebellion. It was sacrilege. And then there was Walumbe. His presence in the myth gave Buganda something else: fear and respect. Walumbe's curse explained why death exists. It gave meaning to loss, to the inevitability of mortality. But it also carried a warning. Disobedience to the divine order brings chaos. In that sense, the myth functioned like a law woven into the fabric of belief. Obey the Kabaka, honor the story, and life will flourish. Defy it, and you align yourself with the forces that brought death into the world. Imagine how deeply that shaped the psychology of the people. The myth wasn't just history, it was social control. This is the brilliance of founding myths. They're not random stories. They're carefully preserved, retold, and passed down because they serve a purpose. They explain why society is organized the way it is and why authority should be respected. Look around the world today, and you'll see the same pattern. The United States rallies around its story of freedom from tyranny. France celebrates its revolution against monarchy. China looks back to ancient dynasties and the mandate of heaven. And Buganda, for centuries, rallied around the tale of Kintu and Nambi, a story that said, "We are here because the gods willed it. We endure because we were chosen." But it's easy to miss how radical this was. Remember, Kintu was a man of no wealth, no army, no power, just a cow. But the myth elevated him into something greater. He became not just the first husband of Nambi, but the spiritual ancestor of a kingdom. His name became so sacred that future rulers borrowed it, claiming his mantle. That's why the first Kabaka was not just Kato, but Kato Kintu. His rule wasn't about himself. It was about tying the present to the timeless origin story. Think about it. Without that myth, Kato Kintu would have been just another ambitious man who seized power. With it, He became the founder of a dynasty that has lasted over 700 years. That's the power of story. It transforms politics into destiny. It makes leadership feel inevitable, almost sacred. And here's the bigger picture. Myths aren't about whether they literally happened. They're about what people believe they mean. Did Romulus and Remus actually get raised by a wolf? Historians doubt it, but for Rome, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Romans believed they were chosen by fate to rule the world. In the same way, the question isn't whether every detail of Kintu and Nambi's tale is factual. The question is, what did the Buganda believe about themselves because of it? And the answer is clear. They believed they were children of a divine story, heirs to a sacred promise, bound together under the Kabaka. And that belief turned clans into a kingdom, and a kingdom into one of the most enduring monarchies in Africa. But here's where it gets even more interesting. If myths gave Buganda its unity and its kings their legitimacy, what lessons are hidden within them? Were these stories simply about explaining the past, or were they coded blueprints for how power should function in the future? That's the question we'll tackle next, digging into the hidden meanings, the lessons, and the warnings tucked inside Buganda's origin story.
Was it just a story, or was it a coded message about power? The legend of Kintu and Nambi wasn't only about romance and rebellion. Beneath its beauty, it carried lessons that shaped how Buganda understood life, leadership, and destiny. First, it whispered the value of obedience. Nambi's choice to return for forgotten millet broke the one rule, and Walumbe followed. From then on, death became part of the human condition. The story warned, defy divine instruction, and there will be consequences beyond imagination. Second, it highlighted unity. All clans could trace their beginnings back to Kintu and Nambi. No matter your lineage, you belonged to the same family. That sense of shared ancestry bound the kingdom together in loyalty to the Kabaka. And finally, it revealed the cost of rebellion. Walumbe's jealousy brought chaos, teaching that unchecked ambition and envy could tear at the fabric of community. So perhaps the myth wasn't just a tale. It was Buganda's first constitution, a spiritual framework for power, unity, and respect. But the story doesn't end there. In the next episode, we'll move from legend into history itself, the rise of Buganda's kingship and expansion. From Kintu's humble beginning with only a cow, to Nambi's love and the defiance that brought death into the world, to Kato Kintu's rise as the first Kabaka, the thread is clear. Myth was never just myth. It was a political tool, weaving together clans, giving rulers divine legitimacy, and shaping the destiny of an entire people. The key takeaway is this: stories build nations. Whether in Buganda, Rome, or modern states, the power of a shared origin story turns belief into authority and memory into unity. As you think about Buganda's beginning, ask yourself, what stories shape my own community today? Because behind every flag, every anthem, every leader, there is always a story. And this is only the beginning. In episode 2, we'll uncover the rise of Buganda's kingship and expansion. Don't miss it.